Hello, everybody. My name is Katie. Welcome to Forever Young Adult, lovers of YA Lit. We are quickly approaching the 1 year anniversary of our very first episode of this little adventure where we, brave educators and teachers and book nerds in the Albuquerque and surrounding area, get together every other Thursday and we present to you, our faithful audience, little book teasers, little trailers of books that we love in hopes of enticing you to pick up a book and give it a shot because there's a book for everybody. Like we say, reading just makes you a better person. Our goal is also to help you if you have young readers in your life, be it their students or your own children or yourself, really anybody. We hope that you find something that you enjoy. We are not of the belief that there are bad books, or not bad books, bad readers, I should say. Everybody can be a reader, they just haven't found the right book yet. So, to kick off tonight's episode, I'm going to pass it over to Miss Misty Horning with our first book today.
Thanks, Katie. So, I have to say that 2 weeks ago, I didn't really book talk anything, but I gave you a preview of two books that I was going to talk about tonight. And holding to my promise, I'm going to talk about those two books. And so the first one is called The Initial Insult by Mindy McGinnis. And if you remember, I said I wasn't sure if she was related to Cindy McGinnis, who wrote the One of Us is Lying, that series, or Karen McGinnis. I'm sorry. She's not. They're not related. They just happen to be two cool authors with the last name McGinnis. I had read one of her other books that I really liked, The Female of the Species. She writes realistic fiction. And this one, I'm going to go ahead and preface it and say it's the first of a duology. So at least it's only two books because, nowadays it seems like everything's a series of three or more. But this is a duology, and this just came out. So it's going to be a little bit till we get that second book. And it does leave off on a cliffhanger. I'll go ahead and tell you that. So this one, though, speaks to my English teacher soul because there is so much embedded intertextuality between her story, Mindy McGinnis's story, and Edgar Allan Poe stories. So I mentioned it last time that it's kind of a retelling of the Cask of Amontillado. Hopefully I said it right. But it ties in a lot of other Poe stories. Like there's three narrators. There's Felicity and there's Truss, the two main characters. And then we have a cat who is a narrator, a black cat. And if you're familiar with Poe, he wrote a story called The Black Cat. And there's four families, the Allens, the Ushers, the Montours, and the fourth one escapes me, but it's four, and the four names straight from Poe stories. So if you're a fan of Edgar Allan Poe, check it out, The Initial Insult by Mindy McGinnis. Even if you're not a fan of Edgar Allan Poe and you're just a fan of like mysteries, it's hands down great. I absolutely 4 out of 5 stars. 5 is really high. 4, that's really good for me. So 4 out of 5. Mindy McGinnis, The Initial Insult. And now we're off to Adrienne.
Thank you very much. I'm going to present my screen. Let's see, tab. The first book that I'm going to talk about, if I can get this to work right, is called People Kill People by Ellen Hopkins. Most of you might be familiar with her work. She does a lot of work in verse. This one was very interesting because it's half verse and then half prose. So it was published in September of 2018, and the setting is in Tucson, present day. And when the book opens, you realize somebody is going to, the poetry is written like the gun was writing it. So by the end of the story, you know that one of the people in the story is going to get shot and one of the other people is going to be the person that shoots them, but you don't know. There's about 7 characters. 6 different point of views. That's a little hard, it jumps around a little bit, but 3 main characters. Silas is a senior in high school, is in a white supremacist group, and his parents are divorced, and his mom's boyfriend is Jewish, and his father is a border agent, and he has a Mexican girlfriend that lives over the border in Mexico, which Silas is not fond of either one of them. We have Daniel, who his mother was deported back to Honduras. He was born, so he got to stay. So he's very bitter. He actually didn't, his dad died, and then he was the product of an affair. So he goes to live with the white wife and son who never knew anything about him until, surprise, this 14-year-old shows up on your doorstep. And then we have Noelle, who's depressed white. She's closeted. Only a few people know about her orientation. And she was the victim of a drive-by in her car where her father died, and she was shot also, and now she has seizures. So it's interspersed with the kind of verse with that the gun does. And so I gave it a 3 out of 5. It was a little confusing, the back and forth, but until the very end, I liked that you didn't know until the very end who was the one who shot and who was the one who got shot. So it kept my attention. I give it a 3.5 out of 5, but I really liked it. And now I'm going to pass it over to Deborah.
So I don't have my book in front of me. I borrowed it from the library, but I'm just going to talk to you about it. The book is called Sky in the Deep by Adrienne Young. It was published a couple years ago in 2018. So I picked it up, and there's another book that's written in the same universe that she wrote in 2019. It doesn't have the same characters, but it's in the same world. But let's get back to Sky in the Deep. I'm not even sure why we have that title, but it's yet another feisty heroine who's out in a fantasy world, and she has to save the day. This novel is set in kind of a Viking land. It's like a Viking type setting where the males and the females fight side by side, hand-to-hand combat, bloody armor, the whole 9 yards. Our heroine is Eowyn. She's 17 years old. She's from the Aska clan. They are feuding with the Riki clan. And several years prior, Eowyn saw her brother killed in a battle against the Riki. So it's time for their annual battle. Yes, they have an annual battle, the Aska and the Riki, and it's time for that again. Eowyn's fighting, and lo and behold, she sees her brother with the Riki. She goes, "What the hey?" Drops everything, starts to follow them, gets herself captured and almost killed by a Riki warrior whose name is Fiske, and gets abducted and taken to the Riki village. Well, there's a big shocker that a romance develops between Eowyn and Fiske eventually, because he's the absolute wrong person for her. And so, of course, that's the one she's going to end up with. But we have to figure out why her brother has now defected to the other side. And she spends about half the novel hoping to get away, and the other half coming to grips with the fact that she loves this guy, Fiske. So it's really Romeo meets Juliet meets Thor meets Wonder Woman, all kind of in the same novel. And I actually liked the setting. It was primitive and a little bit brutal, and there was a lot of blood and guts warfare. There were some interesting takes on the religious beliefs. What I didn't like is, although there's a lot of repeating plots in fantasy novels, this one was so predictable that I had this one down before I even got to chapter 3. I'm like, oh yeah, well, she's going to go to the village and she's going to try to escape. She's going to get wounded. She's going to heal a guy and fall. So for that, I gave it a 3.5 stars. It was readable, but not memorable. So I wouldn't put it up there in my top 10 list, but I definitely enjoyed working through her world a little bit and meeting her characters. So there it is. Sky in the Deep, Adrienne Young. And I'm going to pass it back or over, sorry, Steve, not even back, to Steve.
Hi, everybody. Today, my camera I'm on my laptop and my camera is just frozen, so you see me, but I'm going to talk about Concrete Rose, the new novel by Angie Thomas. And I absolutely loved this book. I've read her 2 other novels, The Hate You Give and On the Come Up, which have female protagonists. This book has a male protagonist. It's the prequel. It's Maverick Carter's story. So it's the prequel to The Hate You Give, Star's father, when he was 17, and the events that change his life that really lead up to what happens before The Hate You Give. But here's the thing: you don't have to have read the other books or Hate You Give. You can start with this one. You don't get you get a little extra side of dramatic irony if you've read The Hate You Give and then you read this. But Maverick is 17. He's just found out he's going to be a father. Faced with the ultimate responsibility, will he continue to sling drugs for the King Lords? Raised in a world that doesn't stake much in a black man's success, will Maverick fall trapped to the gang life or prove he is different? Well, this book, I just think it was a home run, and here's why. The Hate You Give, if you're familiar with that or seen the movie, it's Angie Thomas writes great realistic fiction, authentic, well-drawn characters. But, for example, The Hate You Give has a strong politically conscious message that's relevant to what's been happening in the world today or these last couple of years. With like the Black Lives Matter movement. This book is it's a little more slow paced. It's more of a deep character study into Maverick. And you feel sympathy for him. You just kind of, sometimes you just can't stand him. I think that's a sign of just a well-written character. It kind of pulls you into the story. And my favorite piece of unexpected wisdom from the book to wrap this up is he gets a job with Mr. Wyatt and he starts working, doing some yard work for him and working at his store. And Maverick has the mindset of still being, a gangbanger. And he says, I'm Little Don. Everybody expected me to join. And Mr. Wyatt says because the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, however, it can roll away from the tree. It simply need a little push. So this book will surprise you, I think. It surprised me. I give it a 4.75 out of 5 stars. And I'm going to pass it on to who's next after me? Adrian. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. My second book is called All the Bad Apples, and it's by an Irish author named Maura, I hope I'm saying that right, Fowley Doyle. I love the cover. I have redheads at home, so, and it is set in Ireland in 2012. The publication was just last year in 2019, year before last, and but it's set in Ireland in 2012, very conservative, small town. There are 3 sisters, Dina, who is the star of the book, and rumors are surrounding her at a very, very Catholic high school that she is gay, which she is, and it came out, and her father kind of abandoned them. Her mother died when she was born, and she was raised by her older twin sisters, Mandy and Rachel, who's kind of like the mother figure in the whole book. And Mandy, when the book opens, is presumed to have committed suicide, but Dina does not believe that she committed suicide. They found her car by the cliff, and Dina starts getting letters from Mandy that they're bad apples in their family, and that she needs to go on a journey to kind of prove that she's not a bad apple. And so Dina does not believe that Mandy committed suicide, and so goes on this kind of very magical realism journey to find Mandy, and her friends come and join her. And there's a lot of like going back in the past with the family history and things like that. But it did not, I loved it. It's very lyrical. The scenery was very fascinating in Ireland. The journey that she goes on and the mysterious notes that the sister is one step ahead of her. I loved this book much better than the other one that I read this week, but I recommend it. There was a little bit of a not language barrier, but some of the slang that was, in unknown to me just because it was Irish, but that didn't take away from the book at all. I just really, really love the book. So I recommend it. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. So again, it's All the Bad Apples by Maura Fowley Doyle. And I'm going to turn it over to Katie.
Hello, hello, hello. True to our word, Misty and I agreed last episode to speak about the newest Sarah J. Maas book, A Court of Silver Flames, which is up next with Misty. And I am going to talk about A Court of Frost and Starlight. Now, if you've been here for a while, you know we love Sarah J. Maas. I'm not going to remind you how much we love Sarah J. Maas. We love Sarah J. Maas. This book serves as sort of an epilogue, as a novella to the end of the series, A Court of Thorns and Roses. So if you haven't read that, mute yourself now. Okay. At the end of the third book, they've won the war. The big evil King Hybern is dead. Everybody is sort of starting to put the pieces back together of their lives. And that's really what happens in this book. It's a really short read. You meet all the characters that we've come to know and love from the last 3 books of the series. One thing I really liked about this was that there were multiple narrators, multiple POVs. So if that's your jam, if you like a book that gives you different perspectives from these characters that you love, you might enjoy this one. You kind of really do need to read A Court of Thorns and Roses series before you read this one. So maybe not if you haven't read that series, but it is just a schmoopy, like heartwarming book. It's set around the winter solstice. Our main character, Feyre, her birthday is also on the winter solstice. So there's gift giving, there's heartwarming love and poking fun, like tight-knit family units do. There's some fighting. Characters, like I said, are trying to piece their lives back together after this war destroyed their court, destroyed their town, destroyed the world pretty much. So it's an interesting look at grief and PTSD and how people come to terms with what happened and move forward with the healing process, either by themselves or with their family unit. So it was very heartwarming. It was very nice to meet these characters again. It's been a minute since I've read the Court of Thorns and Roses series, and it prepared me much better to carry on with book number 4 of the series, A Court of Silver Flames. Misty, that's your cue. Up next, Misty Horton.
Thanks, Katie. So as Katie mentioned, huge fan of Sarah J. Maas here in this group. And I read A Court of Silver Flames, which is, as Katie said, it is like the 4th book, like Court of, Frost and Starlight is like 3.5, and this is part 4. And so it does tie up some loose ends that happen in the original series. And it does end in a way that it's like, oh, maybe it's not going to be, maybe it was just 4. Maybe that was her plan. Sarah J. Maas's plan all along is just to have 4 books. I really liked it because it takes a character who were introduced in the original trilogy. We're introduced to Nesta, who is Feyre's sister, and she is a piece of work. And she becomes High Fae from the Cauldron. And this book is really, it's about her. It's about her and her relationship with Cassian, which they might be a new favorite couple. I'm not going to lie. They might be. But with Cassian and Nesta trying to get through the grief of everything that happened in the previous books and the losses that she suffered and coming to terms with her own power as well. We do have the other characters in it. Feyre is in it, and there is something that, you're going to have to read it because something happens and you just want to keep going for it. So, and we get to see Rhys again as well. Tamlin makes an appearance again as well. Same characters, new enemy, but kind of similar old enemy. I don't know. It's just like another continuation. And I'm really glad that I read the 4 books before this one, because it reminded me a lot about the characters that I had forgotten. And there's a lot of things about Nesta in the first 3 books that I think we overlook that maybe catch up on a reread before you hit A Court of Silver Flames. All right. So on to our last talk for the night, and it's all yours, Steve.
Thank you. Okay, everybody, welcome back to my headshot. And I'm going to, I've been on a pattern for this book club for our streaming book talks to do a young adult fiction book and then a graphic novel. One of my favorite genres for young adult fiction is realistic fiction. So that's why you got The Concrete Rose. And I love comics, so you're going to get a comic. And I think that graphic novels do such a great job with nonfiction and memoir. And not enough people out there read nonfiction and memoir comics. I don't read nonfiction and memoir prose anymore. I find comic books that do it because they do it better. A lot of them. Victoria Jameson is the artist and co-writer with Omar Mohammed. She wrote Roller Girl, which is another great mid-school. This is a great middle school graphic novel, by the way. Roller Girl is another great comic she wrote. Totally passes the Bechdel test. It's a pretty awesome book, and this is one of her next major work. So it's interesting how these two met. It kind of gives you some background. She was working in Pennsylvania doing some volunteer work where refugees were relocated to assimilate into America, and she met him, and she was looking to write some nonfiction book, and she's fascinated by story. They became friends. He had already started writing his story. They collaborated to put it together as a comic book, and this is what you get when stars are scattered. In a nutshell, this is just a beautiful, touching story about perseverance and resilience and the human spirit, and real experience of these refugee kids. Him and his brother, who has a disability, who can't speak and has seizures. They have to manage life in the refugee camp. It's basically had to flee Somalia, that war-torn Somalia, and they live in this giant city of a refugee camp in Kenya without their mother, and an older lady kind of takes them on kind of as their sort of surrogate type mother. Omar has a chance to go to school and get an education, but he's got to deal with, he's been sort of having to take care of his little brother. Will he eventually be able to make it to America? And it's a very touching, one of those true stories that just told through words and pictures really takes you into the experience. Like you feel like you're really there and you sympathize, and it's just great. A touching, wow, this is a real story. I'm learning about some real history, contemporary history that you don't really learn about in school, and you get it through a nice, colorful, well-drawn comic. And there's some pictures and stuff. So I'm going to pass it off to Misty to close us off for tonight. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Steve. So tonight you heard some of our most recent reads. Katie started us out talking about how it's been a year almost, and it has. We started our website on May 19th. It reminds me every time I sign in because it says last edited or page created May 19th. And it was around this time where the world was like, here's a curveball. Let's see how you handle life now. And I think a lot of us, we're ready. We're ready to get back to whatever the normal is going to be. But thinking about how we're reading and our relationships, really consider that the books that you all read, the books that we all read, it's really a relationship that we're building. A relationship, we're having a conversation with an author. We're having conversations with characters. We're having conversations with narrators. And it's building that relationship, because I am sure that everybody who you heard talk tonight, when they close a book, they don't stop thinking about it. They don't stop thinking about, oh my goodness, I wonder what, Nesta is doing right now, or, oh, wow, I wonder what's going to happen. We do it. We build those relationships with the books that we read. We build those relationships. I hate stopping a book because I'm always thinking that the characters are going to be doing something's going to happen to the characters when I'm not there, because I believe that the story just keeps going. And so that's why I have a hard time stopping books. when reading them, and I just want to finish them. So keep that in mind, because as we go back to whatever the normal is, we might find that we have less time for things that bring us pleasure, and that reading is something that will help you in every aspect of your life. It'll help you with relationships, it'll help you with socialization, it'll help with you dealing with different types of feelings, and it'll help you not feel alone, because the characters are always there and they can become your best friends. So we will see you in a couple of weeks. Everybody take care. Enjoy the sunshine while we have it, because you never know, we might still get that blizzard come, the beginning of April. Good night.
Good night. Keep reading.
Bye.